In the DesignWorks interview, Miyazaki says that some of the earliest things they worked on were the world, life, death, the meaning of fire, and the role of the four kings. Not humanity, but the four kings, specifically. He also shares how New Londo was the last area the artists worked on, and Waragai, who was in charge of the art for the area, adds that there wasn't much work to do, because almost everything was already in place. So, as we dive into the lore, we can be sure that FromSoft has been meticulous in the design of New Londo, and its surrounding lore. Whatever unique details it has are not just carelessly placed. There is a story of fundamental importance hidden within the lost city, beneath the water's surface. New Londo was once a thriving human city. Its history goes back 1,000 years or more, to before Gwyn linked the First Flame, since he shared a shard of his soul with the Four Kings before he left. Though it may be hard to imagine now, the settlement was once prosperous and had a rich, multifaceted culture. The key to the seal's description makes a point of saying this. The agonizing decision to flood the city was made with the realization that countless lives and the robust culture of the city would be lost. New Londo had its own religion that likely had distinctive miracles according to cut content. More than that, its people were versed in a school of sorcery unique from any other in Lordran. Theirs could heal. Healing techniques are only otherwise seen with miracles. There was also at one point in development plans for two unique rings that hail from New Londo, the Ring of Displacement and the Ring of Blind Ghosts. The former had a chance to damage the wearer at the risk of breaking, and the latter hid the wearer from the ghosts of New Londo. The Ring of Displacement, like the key to the seal, would have also highlighted the city's cultural value. As evidenced by this ring, the culture of New Londo was unique. Though the rings were cut, together it's clear that New Londo was once a prosperous city full of culture and innovation. With all that said, there is something off about New Londo, and I don't just mean the haunting atmosphere now that it's a flooded ruin. Something about the place feels unnatural, especially given its cultural depth. So let's begin by looking at the location itself. New Londo. One of the first possible areas after reaching Firelink Shrine, and certainly the most scary. The ghosts you can't damage, the eerie sound effects, the vast water. Even if you return near the end of the game, it's still a very difficult area. Numerous damaging enemies hidden around every corner, tight passageways, all barely lit by weak blue light. As many of you may know, the city's design was strongly based on the architecture of Mont Saint-Michel in Normandy, France. But we must be careful looking into this. FromSoft is very deliberate in their world building, but not every parallel is equal. We know that the inspiration was strongly tied to the lore as shown in the interview, but that may not apply to some relations outside the area. For example, in the DesignWorks interview, it is stated that New Londo has more modern architecture than much of the rest of the world. This of course makes sense. Its name suggests it arose after Anor Londo, and as we shall see, it was in all likelihood built with their help. However, in our world, the late Gothic marble architecture of Anor Londo would actually pertain to a later period of history than New Londo's Romanesque and early Gothic architecture. In fact, the City of the Gods was inspired by the Duomo of Milan, Italy, which is also a later creation than Mont Saint-Michel. Going forward, therefore, we can be confident that within New Londo even small details have been designed in relation to the lore, but we must be careful when applying this outwards, such as by using it to form a timeline with other areas. Returning to the city itself, the inspiration is clear. Both New Londo and Mont Saint-Michel are vertically organised, walled cities built as stone islands, and at the central summit is a building of religious significance. There are also some stark differences, such as how New Londo is situated within a cave rather than being a true island, or how the city is flooded, not keeping water out. However, as Waragai says, all but the finest details were already in place before working on the area. Therefore, I believe these discrepancies actually serve to highlight New Londo's design, history, and lore, rather than to conflict with them. We must look more closely to discern what FromSoft is trying to tell us. Mont Saint-Michel is a tidal island situated 100 meters from the mainland, and historically it was only accessible during low tide. This, plus its impressive fortifications, meant the settlement was extremely difficult to overthrow. In fact, famously, the town managed to remain unconquered during the 100 Years' War, and even repelled a full attack from the English with only a small garrison in 1433. But then, in recognition of its strong defences, Louis VI transformed the place into a prison, a detention centre where the French locked up dissidents and put them in holding cells, accepting prisoners for a number of centuries. Isn't that interesting? The king saw the town's value and completely inverted its purpose. Just as walls can keep things out, so too can they restrict things within. I believe this is what fascinated Miyazaki, and why he passed on this inspiration in particular to the art team. Why would a town hidden in a cave need such towering walls? Why would its gate be so grand when the valley itself already offers natural defence? And why build it in a place safe from flooding, next to this valley, only to construct floodgates? Miyazaki is trying to highlight why New Londo was built in such a unique manner. Because the city wasn't built to withstand a large threat. It was built to contain one. Not to protect its people from the outside, but to protect the outside from what was sealed within. In which case, let us try and discover evidence of the gods in New Londo's creation, since only those in power could have managed this. The name New Londo already suggests some relationship, but what about within the city itself? The architecture is a far cry from the grand halls of Anor Londo, but that makes sense. The capital represents the might of Gwyn and his Age of Fire. New Londo is a city built within a dark cave in order to contain something within. Looking more closely at the buildings themselves, there is one that stands out. Strangely, it's not the large cathedral-like building, nor where Ingward stands watch. Instead, it is of course the entrance to the Abyss and the Four Kings boss fight. It's a rather small building, with a broken roof and a winding spiral staircase within that leads downwards. But what's eye-catching are the statues. One that reaches just above the water's surface initially, and two that are revealed once you lower the water level. Though the statues definitely feel similar to others in Lordran, it isn't actually the same as any in the Undead Burg, or Firelink Shrine, or more importantly, anything in Anor Londo itself. There is only one matching statue in Lordran, found in the central courtyard of the Painted World. Now, we could argue that this already has a decent connection to the gods, if only indirectly. The painting in question is housed and defended in Anor Londo's cathedral. The gods eventually used the Painted World themselves as a prison separate from this realm, sealing away what they deemed dangerous artifacts, creatures, sinners, or hollows. A repeated theme with New Londo. Plus, this area features a bonfire, and more importantly, can be warped to directly using the power of the Lord Vessel. So this is certainly related to the gods in some manner, but there must be more if the gods really did help build New Londo. What else can we find? Or perhaps more telling, what else can we not find? There are the statues we've looked at, there are the statues adorning the lift chambers from both Firelink Shrine and from Darkroot Garden on the opposite side of the city. But within New Londo itself, there are no distinctive designs of any kind. There are no other statues, no crests, no decorative symbols or detailing at all, save for one subtle adornment on the cathedral's roof that looks like a finial of some kind, though we'll have to return to this later to work out what it might mean. We've already established how New Londo's culture was both broad and deep, so this absence can't just be a coincidence. There must have been some active reason no symbols or otherwise were allowed. Dark Souls may not have been able to have as many unique symbols as the later FromSoft games, but even a brief look at other areas shows how the lack of detailing in New Londo was a conscious design choice. Flooding may have eroded some edges of the stonework, but engravings would still be possible to make out, similar to how the statues look. New Londo wasn't just built to contain its inhabitants within, but to actively suppress their culture and identity as well. Fortunately, the search for symbols doesn't end there. If we turn to the giant gates of New Londo, there are finally a number of unique symbols emblazoned on the enormous metal frames that keep the gates shut. At first we wondered if this might be the seal or crest of New Londo, proudly displayed at the city's entrance. However, when a settlement displays their flags, banners, crests or otherwise at the main entrance, they serve to send a message to others outside, a warning, a welcome, as some form of declaration for all to see. The bars on the inside that block the gate from opening would instead be unmarked, serving only as a blockade and not something meant to be admired. In New Londo, however, the symbols are found on both the outside and inside bars. It's saying something to people within the city just as much as to those outside. Once again, New Londo wasn't built like a normal city, and right from its creation, its purpose was to contain and control the inhabitants. The symbols are displayed on both sides of the gate because it needed to send the message both outwards and inwards. Whether you were a New Londo civilian or a traveller from elsewhere in Lordran, you were not to cross the barrier. The gate symbol is unique across Lordran, but just like the city's architecture, the gods wouldn't have styled New Londo's gate directly after Anor Londo either. However, it does actually share a lot of its design with stonework in the capital, and even a bit with the Duke's archives. Stylized floral and fan-like motifs. As we've looked at previously, it was most likely the nameless blacksmith deity's workmanship behind the construction of Anor Londo and the Duke's archives. So could they also have been involved in New Londo? The sheer size of New Londo's gates already places their creation squarely in the giant deity's domain. There are also floodgates, waterproof, which demonstrates the incredible skill behind their creation. But most important of all, is that these massive gates operate by an amazing system of gears. Smaller gear systems are found throughout Lordran, but there has clearly been a lot of thought behind the lore for how larger systems operate. The door in Darkroot Garden is opened with ancient magic by the crest of Artorias. Sen's fortress uses a giant to manually open the main gate. But New Londo's is mechanical, and makes use of cogs and levers. And where else are large cog mechanisms found? There's the Duke's archives, whose rotating staircases are a marvel of workmanship. Then, of course, is the enormous broken cog system at the bottom of the prison tower, a system that once would have presumably operated an incredible rotating and spiral staircase system to allow access to all the books and chambers in the room, many of which are now inaccessible. Then there is Anor Londo. The capital has this incredible rotating spiral staircase in the centre of the city. It also has a giant gate into the main cathedral. Both are operated using a large lever and cog system. The nameless blacksmith deity was responsible for both these places, and was clearly very mechanically skilled. But if that wasn't enough, the deity also crafted the weapons and armours for the gods. We've previously looked at how this flower symbol is an identifying mark, and can be found throughout their creations, such as on Gwyn's armour, or Smoset. In fact, Smoset is Miyazaki's personal favourite, and as strange as it may look, it's actually a collection of flowers. From the flower symbols, the large petal pattern around the waist, or the hammer's shape as looked at from above. But there's also another symbol on Smo's hammer that is displayed with equal importance: a cog. Just as the flower serves as an identifying mark, so too does the cog relate to the enigmatic deity, and their unique mechanical expertise within Lordran. Given the mechanical complexity and detailing of New Londo's floodgates, it too must have also been the deity's design. Even if you don't believe the deity was behind all these places, what's certain is that it was the craft of the gods behind each of their construction, even if it wasn't the deity themselves. The blacksmith's presence in the city doesn't stop there though, but we'll leave that for later. So, New Londo was created by the gods, and its design, from architecture to location, centered not on defense, but the containment of those within. The gate served not to protect the populace or keep water out, but to imprison them and ensure a flood was possible by keeping water in. The question is, why? Who lived in New Londo that even the gods feared? And why set up this threat in such a central position in Lordran? New Londo was an undead city, a settlement of humans, descendants of the furtive pygmy who found the Dark Soul when time began.
So easily forgotten.
The introduction is right on the mark here. The pygmy really is difficult to remember. But it's not a coincidence. Though the nature of the dark is gentle and soft, its power and importance to the world, and especially to the player themselves, surely couldn't fall out of memory. Unless this was enforced. Just like how New Londo was suppressed, both physically and culturally. This is why the role of the Four Kings was so important to Miyazaki. They're not just heads of a city or another antagonist within Lordran. They're a bridge between Gwyn, the gods, and humanity. What they do, and the relationship they represent between humans and gods, are central to the entire lore of Dark Souls. According to the soul the kings drop on defeat, Lord Gwyn recognised the foresight of these four great leaders of New Londo, and granted them their ranks and the fragments of a great soul. There are two interesting details here. The first is that Gwyn gave a fragment of his own soul, a mark of just how important the work of the Four Kings was to him. The second is that Gwyn granted them rank. That's to say, the role they have as the Four Kings is different to their position before Gwyn noticed them. First leaders, then kings who served Gwyn himself. The Japanese translation for the Four Kings is official or public kings, which leads me to believe they were figurehead kings who serve only as puppets to the gods. After all, having four equally powerful kings makes little sense. Instead, Gwyn was likely the one controlling everything from behind the scenes. All because Gwyn harboured a deep fear for humans and their dark, the antithesis to his Age of Fire. A story most of us first realised after defeating the Four Kings and speaking to Darkstalker Karth.
The truth I shall share without sentiment. After the advent of fire, the ancient lords found the three souls, but your progenitor found a fourth, unique soul, the Dark Soul. Your ancestor claimed the Dark Soul and waited for fire to subside, and soon the flames did fade, and only dark remained. Thus began the Age of Men, the Age of Dark. However, Lord Gwyn trembled at the dark, clinging to his Age of Fire and in dire fear of humans and the Dark Lord who would one day be born amongst them. Lord Gwyn resisted the course of nature by sacrificing himself to link the fire and commanding his children to shepherd the humans. Gwyn has blurred your past to prevent the birth of the Dark Lord.
Gwyn suppressed humanity and prolonged his dying Age of Fire. Then, when he left, he commanded his children to follow in his footsteps and continue shepherding the humans. But Gwyn's fixation on humans didn't begin there. New Londo was just the final product in a long line of calculated oppression. His fear runs so far back that it started before even the war against the ancient dragons. A fear that Gwyn hid from the world, and a tale that reveals just how much he occluded humans from history. For the pygmies who took the Dark Soul, the Great Lord gifted the Ringed City, an isolated place at World's End, and his beloved youngest daughter. Another walled human city, this time hidden at World's End, far away from his kingdom. The supposed gift of a city was in essence banishment, and he still kept an eye on the pygmies, the dragon Midir was tasked to eternally battle the dark and contain its spread. But most telling of all were the Ringed Knights and how Gwyn treated them. The Ringed Knights were so powerful that Gwyn enlisted them to fight against the mighty dragons, but their contributions were never lauded, as described by the Dragonhead shield. Gwyn actively manipulated public knowledge of humans even then, not just with New Londo. The Abyss appearing in New Londo or Oolacile is also not a first. It too was present in the age before Gwyn's, and it was under control to the extent that the armour of early men could be forged within it. The Abyss is what made Gwyn truly afraid. He saw the end of his age in the power of its empty void. For this reason, the gods cast a seal of fire upon such armour, and those who possessed them. Gwyn didn't know how to control humanity, so instead he sought to contain it. Using the power of fire, he quarantined the humanity within humans, just as he isolated humans themselves. He suppressed their legacy, their rights, their own humanity, and cast them to the fringes of the world itself. All because he knew he could not defeat the dark any more than dark could defeat light. He saw that the natural cycle of the world would eventually have the fire fade, and the age of dark would begin. But knowledge is not wisdom. Thousands of years later, he still controlled humans in much the same manner as with the Ringed City. Gwyn quarantined New Londo's populace, stifled their culture, and monitored the city through proxies. But the Four Kings' foresight was something that Gwyn rewarded them for, and that Miyazaki saw as a fundamental building block in the lore. I believe the Four Kings realised more could be done with the human population. As puppet rulers for Gwyn, they served not just to contain the humans, but to channel them. They supplied a steady flow of humanity, farming undead for the gods in proxy, and the insight to use the undead may have been what Gwyn rewarded the kings for. Gwyn's response to humanity had always been suppression, until he learnt how to use them thanks to the insight of the Four Kings. Before this, the gods learnt through experience, manipulating various human settlements across the realm. Indeed, look at what's opposite the gate to New Londo, the gate made by the nameless blacksmith deity. Across the bridge is a large pile of rubble from what looks like a broken entrance to somewhere. But look closely. The tower on one side, the architecture and walkway above, the large slots that would fit enormous bars. This gate is of the exact same construction as New Londo's. Isn't that strange? If the gate required such heavy investment and skill to create, then why would another be built right across the valley to seemingly nowhere? Well, as shown by the adjacent lift, above the broken gate is Darkroot Garden, which only a few hundred years ago was instead the human town of Oolacile, another human town that Gwyn manipulated, watched over by his own knights, a town which also fell to dark. But Oolacile's fate was very different to New Londo. Their society and town collapsed and was lost, swallowed by the Abyss. New Londo was very uniquely flooded. But this used the very same gates that seemed to have once blocked the way to Oolacile. So what happened in Oolacile? And did the gods once intend to flood New Londo's neighbours as well? If you made it this far, consider supporting the channel and get early access to upcoming releases, feature your own theories on the channel, or even get access to new Lore Before Bed videos ad-free for less than $1. Your support makes content like this possible, so thank you.